Social determinants of health and the impact of ACEs on early childhood. Oakland University School of Health Sciences, Public and Environmental Wellness. I'm Kaniqua Mulder, and this is PH 5650 under the teachings of Dr. Chisholm. So, adverse childhood experiences refer to potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood between birth and 17 years of age. Dr. Felitti has done a lot of research on this since about 1998. And so acts of violence or witnessing violence, abuse, or neglect in the home or the community are experiences that are identified as having these lasting impacts on children and their development, especially in preschool settings. And so children are at a critical stage of social, emotional, and cognitive development. And if they are exposed to these negative experiences without any intervention, then they can potentially have developmental delays. And so for the earliest learners, those who actually attend preschool, ACEs will show up in different ways. And so we can see patterns of behavioral issues, difficulty in forming relationships with their peers or adults. And there can be a difficulty in their ability to learn or concentrate during class. Or they can experience, bouts of aggression or their which can affect their ability to engage positively with their peers or the educators who are working with them. And so, if we look at social determinants of health and adverse childhood experiences and how they're connected, social determinants of health are the conditions in which people are born, they grow, they live, they work, and age, and they include factors such as their social economic status, education, neighborhoods, and the physical environment, employment, or social support networks. And so the impact that ACEs can, in combination with social determinants of health, have on a child's life at their earliest age without support can actually affect their ability to cope in a positive manner without some interventions or strategies. And so in order to address ACEs in early childhood settings, it requires creating environments that are supportive, nurturing. The goal is to intervene on the impact that adverse experiences can have on the child in their stages of development. And children who attend preschool or are in these settings need to be provided access to mental health services, implement some trauma-informed practices, and build positive relationships between the children and the caregivers in these settings. And so if we look at a policy focus, policy changes play a crucial role in shaping the implementation of trauma-informed practices in early childhood education settings. Policies that have to prioritize trauma-informed approaches, which, if implemented, have the potential to increase, funding, training, resources for the educators and caregivers. And so these policies, if established, create a framework that can identify and address trauma, foster safe and supportive environments, and integrate mental health services in early childhood. And so if we look at the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, or if we look at 0to3.org, we can look at the results, right? We know that there are some results of unmet needs for children experiencing trauma. And so if we increase behavioral and emotional support, then we can impact emotional and behavioral challenges that impact long-term development of these same children. And so there has to be a comprehensive view of trauma-informed practices. And by addressing these traumas at a child's earliest age, in environments like preschool settings, which provide high quality education or should provide high quality education, there is a potential to break the cycle of adversity. And the Trauma Informed Education Act of 2024 was both an advocacy and legislative policy that highlighted the importance of integrating trauma informed approaches in educational settings. And so it provides funding and resources to support trauma-informed practices so that children can receive care and support while they're in school. And if we look at the National Association for Education of Young Children, or NAEYC, and 0to3, they actually press policymakers in Michigan to understand the importance of implementation of these trauma-informed practices in early childhood settings. And so if we look at the social determinant of health framework, since adverse childhood experiences in preschool settings are influenced by social determinants of health, which shapes a child's early development and their long-term well-being, educational access, neighborhood environment, social and community support are the focus. And so children from low-income families tend to experience food insecurity, unstable housing, lack of access to high-quality childhood education programs, live in unsafe conditions, or in communities that are riddled with violence. And that's from Kennedy 2020 and Mercy 2009. And regardless of these same children, in order to intervene on these adversities, if we look at the CDC, if we look at the Healthy People 2030, all they need is a strong support network to buffer these adverse experiences. And so Brofenbrenner's ecological system theory is a comprehensive framework. It helps us understand how various environmental systems influence human development, and it's relevant to use for support for policy changes related to adverse child experiences. If we look at Brofenbrenner's microsystem, it's associated with immediate environment in which the child lives. For example, the family, the school, the peer groups. This means it is important to understand that direct interactions and relationships that students have in school and at home are important. The mesosystem involves these interconnections between different microsystems. And so, for example, if we look at the relationship between the child and their home and their school, the exosystem looks at a broader or indifferent effect the child has on the social system. And so if we look at these things, the macro system looks at the cultural values, the laws, the societal norms, while the chronal system will look at the transitions and historical events related to the child. And so this framework can shift policies in a way that aims to prevent ACEs by addressing risk factors at multiple levels. And so if we continue to look at Brofenbrenner's ecological system to a child's social determinants of health, indirectly or directly, the biggest impact on a preschooler could be their social system. And the impact that the child's parents, work environment, or job in general, for example, can have on the development can lead to different outcomes. And so we can look at, does the family or the parents have job security? Do they work decent hours? Or do they have a stressful job? If a parent's job is stable or secure, then this child will have resources that are readily available. However, if the child's parents have a stressful, unstable, insecure job, then the child may have an increased stress not only at home, but also at school. They may lack resources, and this impacts the child emotionally and socially by what the parent may be experiencing. And so it may not be that the child directly is experiencing, but because they're in the environment of the parent, they are experiencing, indirectly. And so if the child gets sick or the child wants to go somewhere like the library, for example, does the parent have access, or flexibility to do that? Stop working, take their kid to the doctor, and they're not being impacted on the outside, on the other end of that. And so Brofenbrenner's framework classically aligns with the child's development and it can be impacted directly by their parents when social determinants of health are added into this formula. And so McLeod 2020 talks about policies that need to be put in place to give the child a fighting chance. And so parents, who have these workplaces that offer flexible hours or who have options to work from home can flex their time, have a different experience. Their child has a different experience than a parent who doesn't have this access. And so this ability for parents to spend more time with their children in different settings, or TUDGE et al. 2017 states that children who arrive at school hungry will engage with their teachers and peers quite differently than those who arrive well fed. Children who come from homes in which their parents have time, interest, and energy to invest in them will arrive in school much better prepared. And so Brofenbrenner's theory has an impact on social determinants of health, on these early learners. And so if we look at policy recommendations, how do we support trauma-informed training and practices in early childhood programs? It's an investment. It's not just about education, but the future of our earliest learners and the communities in which they live in and grow in. It is essential to equip, educators with the necessary tools to align with supporting the families of the children that they're serving. There's a need to create these safe, and supportive environments that children, along with their parents, can thrive in collectively. And this means that academically, socially, emotionally, the educators, along with these families, are working together with evidence-based strategies that will give them outcomes that can essentially break cycles of adversity, foster resilience, and push to have healthier communities for our children. And so, if we look at the Campaign for Trauma Informed Policy and Practice, or CTIP, it provides valuable insight and resources on what implementing trauma informed approaches and practices look like in certain systems, including education, healthcare, and community services. If we look at HR Bill 8981, it ensures that educators receive necessary trauma-informed trainings to support their children effectively, and that it requires that teachers are given trainings and that remain in spaces so that they can identify and address the effects that their children who may experience adversities, how it impacts their learning, and reintroduce this. So this legislation, in my opinion, needs to be reintroduced because what it does is it increases the funding and it prioritizes trauma-informed practices, and that's a focal point of interest. And then if we look at policymakers, can we promote the PACE Act of 2023 because it addresses the critical needs of preventing adverse child experiences, and it fosters the PACEs, right? Positive childhood experiences. And so as we're upstreaming, if these are supported, it will push policymakers to increase the establishment of programming that is geared towards trauma-informed practices, mental health support, safe environments. And so the Social Determinants of Health Playbook demonstrates strategies and policies that are aimed at creating supportive environments for young children. And so we need to have initiatives in supporting practices that provide access to high quality early childhood education, that align with supporting the initiatives that give educators what they need to support their children and their families. And so that's my take on adverse childhood experiences and social determinants of health.